In late 2016, I broke the story of the falling out between the President of the Republic of Kenya and his deputy. At the time, I was publishing most of my information in what I used to call Kumekucha's raw notes. And despite the fact that I indicated when I released this information that it was from very credible sources, I had a flurry of my faithful members unsubscribing. To most Kenyans, I had gone mad, because this kind of information was not only mind-boggling, it was ridiculous. Or so most thought, because they asked the question, for instance, how do you fall out with your deputy on the eve of a general election, where is expected to be a running mate? How does that work when the popularity of one Raila Amolo Odinga is picking up by the day? This is what was happening at the time, with the Zokoa Kenya initiative. Oh yes, admittedly at face value, that information seemed erroneous, wrong. But there are two types of analysts. There's the kind that analyzes information which is in the public domain, and maybe talks to one or two people, and then they form an opinion. And then there's a type that digs, deeper and deeper, and then reports and analyzes according to the information they have gathered. And of course, I'm the latter. Bottom line, I don't blame those people, or I don't blame most Kenyans for thinking that had gone out of my mind. But even today, there are those who still doubt this information. Oh yes, despite the evidence we've seen all over the place. And of course, some of these people are trying to apply logic to politics, which normally does not work, or at least does not work all the time. Because politics is not about logic. It involves humans, and changing circumstances, and human nature, and opportunities which people want to grab. That's what politics is all about. And therefore, something which does not look logical, does not seem logical, doesn't make sense, quite often happens. Because who told you that a human being uses logic to make their decisions all the time? And I don't want to go into that discussion, but take it from me. Humans are emotional beings. All decisions, virtually all decisions, are made emotionally. And prevailing circumstances affect emotion. So people make a decision emotionally, and then they look for the logic to support their decision. Anyway, the current question in the minds of many Kenyans, which illustrates the fact that people still can't believe that what is unfolding, is the simple question, why can't President Uhuru Kenyatta deal with his deputy, if indeed there's a problem? What is he waiting for? After all, he is the President of the Republic of Kenya with sweeping powers. He can wake up tomorrow morning and do the necessary. And don't tell me about the Constitution, because we have seen before presidents in Kenya acting despite the Constitution. Now, that's a good question. And I will not answer it with kizungu mingi. No. I will answer it with a very nice, fascinating story from Kenya's past. And I find it super fascinating that there are a lot of questions surrounding this story that are still a deep mystery. Kenyans have more questions about this period in Kenyan history than answers. And maybe a lot of you today will get some answers, hopefully. Let's get down to it. Now, when President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi took over power, after the passing on of Kenya's first president, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, it took him a very long time to settle into office. Apparently, it took him a very long time for it to dawn on him that he was actually the President of the Republic of Kenya. I personally believe that this is the fact, this single fact, is what caused a lot of problems and a lot of drama. And let's start with the drama first. The story is told of how when Moi used to return into the country, they would scramble Air Force jets to escort his passenger jet as soon as it flew into Kenyan airspace. Now, those in the know will tell you that it costs a lot of money to get a single Air Force jet into the sky, let alone several. Wow, all that waste of taxpayers' money for the sake of helping a president get self-confidence. All that waste of money, just to make somebody gain confidence that is the President of the Republic of Kenya. But in those days, there was another DP Ruto, on the scene. The man who was most responsible for making Moi president. And it was a man called Charles Mugane Njonjo, the then AG, Attorney General. And in those days, the AG under the old constitution was also the chief public prosecutor or the director of public prosecutions. In other words, the office of the AG and the office of the director of public prosecutions was under one man, one office. Anyway, this powerful DP Ruto of the time, fell from grace, was removed from office. Actually, you need to understand that he was much more powerful than a mere AG. His tentacles spread right across the country. Every powerful office you could think of, had a Njonjo man. But my point is, he was removed, and he was not removed by President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi waking up one morning and doing the necessary. No. The whole operation, took at least 3 years. And I'm not kidding. You see, in Kenya, when you remove somebody from office, you remove an entire community, an entire center of influence. And so, the political repercussions and political consequences spread far wider than a single individual. That's how Kenyan politics has always been. So already, you have an answer there. But let us go deeper into this very fascinating tale. Now, according to one of the most respected Kenyan political analysts, indeed the most respected political analyst of all time, a man called Hilary Ngweno, who for years ran a weekly political magazine called Weekly Review, the fall of Njonjo was mainly caused by a power struggle within the Moi cabinet between Moi's then vice president, Mwai Kibaki, and Charles Njonjo. Now, with all due respect to Hilary Ngweno, my senior, and by a handful of decades, I don't agree. Because for starters, anybody who knows Mwai Kibaki's fence-sitting habits, will tell you immediately that he has never been involved in a political mudslinging fight in his life. He hated them. He considered himself above them. He considered getting involved in such things stooping too low. Now, having said that, it is also true that Mwai Kibaki and Charles Njonjo disagreed on very many issues publicly, including the most famous issue, of whether to vet former KPU members ahead of the general elections, in the 80s or not. This, of course, was kizungu mingi for saying whether to allow Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Raila Odinga's father, to contest those elections and to come back into active politics or not. That was really the question. Kibaki felt that it was okay, to allow Jaramogi back into politics. Njonjo felt very strongly the opposite, that the person was not to be allowed under any circumstances, anywhere near politics again. And bear in mind that clearly President Moi had already made a decision, to bring Jaramogi back into politics. So Njonjo's feelings or Njonjo's view overruled what the president had already decided. Bottom line, yes, things like this happen, but that was not, in my view, part of this political power struggle. Because there was no power struggle. Those were just the views of Mwai Kibaki, siding with the president, and the views of one Charles Njonjo, period. And close as he was to Njonjo, President Moi that is, I believe the reason why he reversed his decision was not because of Njonjo. I believe it was because of the intelligence community, the deep state. Because the same people, who had finished Jaramogi's political career was still there and making decisions in the intelligence community. Anyway, this is what I really believe happened. A decision was made to deal with Njonjo, to remove him from politics. And the whole plot by the deep state started with a man called Andrew Muthemba. Andrew Muthemba was an engineer and a very successful businessman, a rich man. But he had also been trained in Russia, the former Soviet Union. That is where the man went to university. Now bear in mind that in those days, bang in the middle of the Cold War, any prominent Kenyan with a past of the Soviet Union, especially trained in the Soviet Union, was under constant surveillance by the intelligence community. My theory is that somebody approached Bwana Muthemba and told him if he was willing to help the country, if he was willing to be of service to the country called Kenya. And then he was given his instructions, because what he did next makes absolute zero sense. You see, he was a cousin to Charles Njonjo, a distant cousin, but they were not close. So Muthemba booked an appointment to see the AG, Charles Njonjo. And when he got the appointment, he told Njonjo that he had information on some people smuggling foreign currency and gun running, smuggling weapons. And then after this, it appeared that what Muthemba did is that he went into a deep undercover operation whose purpose was to smoke out the real culprits. Now I know for a fact, and anybody who knows how Kenya runs knows for a fact, that you cannot do the things Muthemba did without help from the intelligence community. No way. Now this Muthemba visit to his cousin Charles Njonjo happened in 1980. Now about a year later, on the morning of Thursday, March 19th, 1981, Kenyans woke up to some shell-shocking information. Newspaper headlines screamed about a Nairobi businessman called Andrew Mungai Muthemba being charged in a court for attempting to overthrow the government of Kenya. There was a lot of humor in that particular charge sheet which I want to share with you. And I quote, this is what the charge sheet said, that between December 15th, 1980 and February 23rd, 1981, Muthemba compassed, imagined, or intended to depose by unlawful means President Moi from his position as President of Kenya. The most hilarious word there, of course, is imagined. Yani the guy had dreams. Yani it was unlawful to have a dream that you're actually trying to overthrow a government. The details of that case, which cannot even be called a case, because there was absolute zero evidence to support such a serious charge. The details were that between December 15th, 1980 and February 23rd, 1981, Muthemba had tried to get a Corporal Joseph Njiru Shimba to steal from the Kenya Army or Kenya Defense Forces 10 hand grenades, 10 remote control devices, and an unspecified number of aircraft bombs. Now, what should be very obvious is that even if it was true, somebody was trying to steal those arms, it is more likely that they were trying to steal them to sell them off to somebody else, rather than to try and overthrow a government. And I shall come back in a minute to the reason why it was important to get this case to court, even though there was absolutely zero evidence. There was really no case. I'll come back to that in a minute. Anyway, predictably, the case went nowhere. And Muthemba was acquitted. Now, Andrew Muthemba passed on in 2003. But shortly before he passed on, he spoke to a Nation reporter, in the only known interview he has given concerning this incident. And he said the following, and I quote, "What you're asking will only be asked in heaven. I'm a born-again Christian now and in a different kingdom. That chapter is closed. But what I did for the good of the government." End of quote. And if we can go back a little to the trial, this is what Muthemba told the chief magistrate. Fida Hussein Abdullah. He said, and I quote, "I was performing my duty. I was not doing it for my own ends." End of quote. Now, the reason why the case appeared in court was to bring it to the attention of the public. In my view, it was part of a wider plot to finish Charles Njonjo. Bottom line, those who took a case with no evidence to court were not interested in a successful prosecution. No, they were interested in public exposure. Because at that trial, Charles Njonjo himself also appeared. He was called to court to give evidence. And while admitting that Muthemba was indeed his cousin, he said he did not authorize him to do anything. Now, what followed next, to prove to you that this was purely political, was that in Parliament, people started talking about a traitor. And they started pointing directly to Charles Njonjo, who was then still in the cabinet, as the traitor. This even culminated in the president himself, President Daniel Moi, saying that there was a traitor in his government. And of course, after that public meeting, it was a Harambee, somewhere in Kisii, Charles Njonjo had a press conference where he emphasized that he was still very loyal to the government of Daniel Toroitich arap Moi. But of course, this fell on deaf ears because the damage had already been done. To cut a very long story short, all this culminated in the infamous Commission of Inquiry into the conduct of Charles Njonjo. An inquiry, mainly by calling political enemies of Charles Njonjo to testify, pieced together what looked like a watertight case of treason against Charles Njonjo. And of course, the Andrew Muthemba case resurfaced and featured prominently in that Commission of Inquiry. Now, one of the things that came up in the inquiry, that in my view was the closest thing to evidence, but just quite couldn't cut it, was that actually somebody had recorded, somebody had gone into a meeting with Muthemba and recorded the conversation. And this conversation, nobody ever had it. But the transcript of that conversation was made available. Now, my problem with the transcript is that you can plant things. You can change things. Why not bring the original audio to prove your case? Anyway, in that conversation, Muthemba is alleged to have said something like, in Kikuyu, "Vatano mondo uyu ehere." Translation, that's Kikuyu. Translation, the important thing is that this man goes. And of course, everybody imagined that this man was President Moi. The man who must ehere, the man who must go in that conversation, or part of a conversation, was Moi. Everybody imagined that. But there was no further proof, to prove actually it was Moi being talked about, let alone this being a transcript, not the original audio. Now, of course, after the inquiry, Charles Njonjo, instead of being taken straight to court to be charged with treason, got a presidential pardon, but was allowed to continue this business, but never ever go anywhere near politics. Now, just to finish off this tale, I believe, the main person in government who influenced Moi to go in this direction was a man called Nicholas Kipiator Biwott. In those days, the Kalenjin community were very wary of the Kikuyu. And that's not all. Biwott had served as a personal assistant to a man called Bruce Mackenzie. Now, Bruce Mackenzie was even at one time a cabinet minister in charge of agriculture. But it was later known that he was actually a foreign intelligence agent for at least two foreign powers. The Mossad of Israel and the British Foreign Intelligence Service. And being a personal assistant to such a man, Biwott accumulated some habits straight out of a spy movie. For instance, he would never allow in Parliament for anybody to serve him with tea. He would actually go to where the tea was and pour out a cup for himself. And even when mobile phones arrived in Kenya, Biwott never ever owned a phone. What he'd do is to look for nobody around him and borrow their phone from them and make his call. Even later in his life, when Biwott was out of politics, his personal security was just crazy. I believe this was the man who tilted the thinking of President Daniel Toroitich arap Moi. Bottom line, in answering that question we started with, removing somebody from political office in Kenya is not a one-day operation. Neither is it a one-year operation. It can take a very long time, and deliberately so. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha. Everything is gloomy in Kenya at the moment, especially the economy. And in many parts of the world, it is the same. So why should any sane person talk about making money in an economy where there's no money? Only a nutcase would do that, right? Actually, wrong. Because history has repeatedly shown us that the best time to make some serious money is when the economy is suffering. And the more the economy is suffering, the better your chances of making some serious money. To date, the American Great Depression of the 1930s still holds the record of producing the highest number of self-made millionaires ever in the history of the United States. People like this guy who produced the game of Monopoly, which somehow made people feel great, because it involved handling dollar bills, which in real life in those days, they were not able to handle much. Okay, I understand you. Facts are great. But what does one do faced with the harsh realities of no money? Glad you asked. Because I've just completed producing an amazing documentary, a 3-part documentary, titled How to Prosper in a Gloomy Economy. People on this channel are always talking about how my videos have changed their lives. But folks, this is the real deal. And what is more, there are no theories here, only very practical stuff. Let me just give you one example of what I mean. If you've ever lived in a foreign country, you know how difficult it is for a foreigner to start a business, even a small business. Well, I was once stuck in a foreign country with no money, and I successfully started a business. And what's more, and I believe very important, without breaking any of the laws of that country. It can be done. And people often make the big mistake of assuming that the most important component in a successful business is money. It isn't. It is simply a well thought out ideal idea coupled with a brilliant way of finding customers quickly and cheaply. That's it. My amazing documentary will hold your hand and help you find the ideal idea for where you are right now, even if it's your own country, going through perhaps the most difficult economic times in its history. I want you to change your mindset right now and decide that every time you see the word problem, every time you see a news item with a problem, a serious problem people are facing, replace that word problem with the word opportunity. In my documentary, I not only tell you precisely how to do this, I give you practical, real-life examples of how it was done before, or how it has been done before, by many, some of whom I helped, and some of whom have never met me. So, take action right away. It is okay to celebrate Christmas, but just make sure that you hit the year 2020 running. Because I know, you know, and I don't need to tell you, that those who will reach 2020 still waiting for something to happen and not doing anything about it are going to have a very difficult 2020. The full documentary costs only $54 or 5,400 shillings. But if you want to order only one part of the documentary at a time, which you can, it will cost you only $19 per part. And I've already told you it's in 3 parts. And there's more. Yeah, if you order all 3 parts together, I will throw in the amazing ebooks, 101 brilliant business ideas that will thrive in Kenya or anywhere else in the world, and also how to get plenty of customers right away. I will send you those 2 ebooks completely for free. I highly recommend that you don't waste any time in making this investment in the year 2020 that will make all the difference.